I a little bit apprehensive of reading this book when I live alone and reading this one of an evening time? Yes. Hello my loves, and thank you for joining. It's Kirsten and we are going through 10 books I want to read during autumn. And that's actually a question for you. What do you call it? Do you call it autumn or fall? Here in the UK we call it autumn, but I'd be very intrigued to see what you call it where you are. But okay, during the seasonal TBR we have a mixture of a short story collection, a classic, one continuation of a series, and then 7 other books that are just giving me the autumnal vibe. Now a lot of these are actually darker, and I have been saying a lot that I prefer having a balanced mix between cozy and more gothic leaning books and fantasy. And well, anything else that isn't cozy. I don't have any cozies in this list, however, apart from the short story collection, and that's just because I'm actually going to be reading 3 new cozy releases every single month, and I haven't mentioned those in this list. But there will be that balance between cozy books and darker books. These are just ones that I currently have off my physical TBR, and then the cozy books, they're going to be, well, the new releases, so I'll be getting them as they come out and reading them that way. But in this lot of books, we've mainly got thrillers, murder mysteries, horrors, and then we've got a darker fantasy and all of that. But okay, let's get straight into this and let me know, what are you going to be reading throughout this autumnal season? We're going to start off with a short story collection, and of course that had to be Autumn Chills by Agatha Christie. This one was gifted to me by Jane, so thank you so much. This is one that I'm really excited to get into. So I read the summer seasonal collection during summer and loved it. I loved doing that. It also helped me discover that I really like having a short story collection on the go. There's just something so nice and comforting about being able to sit down and read a short story every so often. Maybe you're between books. Maybe you just have a spare 30 minutes at the start of your day or at the end of your day and you just want to unwind to a little short story. I really love it, so I'm very excited to carry on the seasonal collections and read this one. I'm definitely going to get myself the winter collection so I can do the same when it comes around to winter. These are little short murder mystery stories. We have our usual suspects of Hercule Poirot, Miss Marple, Tommy and Tuppence, but there'll be a couple of other ones thrown in for good measure, and these are all stories that take place either during the months of autumn or just give you those autumnal vibes, or sometimes they're just there because, well, why not? But I really like Agatha Christie. I really like the murder mystery stories. I love the short story collections. Like, it works. It's everything I want it to be. But this is the coziest book on this list, and you know what? This works really well. I'm very happy to have this one on here, and I am going to read it over the course of autumn. It's not something I'm going to pick up every single week, but it will be something that I go to when I'm feeling like it. You know, a nice hot drink, a blanket, and reading a short story for 30 minutes. Perfect. Like, I love it so much for that. This is a nice little collection of all different mysteries, and will I be able to solve any of them? Probably not. Will I have read probably at least 1 or 2 of these? Yes, because I've already read the Miss Marple short story collection, which houses all of the Miss Marple short stories, so I will see a repeat, but I don't mind that. I always like rereading anyway, and it's quite fun to do with the short stories. So yeah, I'm very excited to read this one, and I just think it is so beautiful and perfect for autumn. The next book we're getting into, I've actually already started reading, but from last year. This was a soft DNF, and that is The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. This is a book that I really wanted to read because it's inspired by Dracula. It's actually seen as like a more modern, up-to-date version of Dracula. Fascinated for that. I love retellings of my favourite gothic classics. I adore Dracula. It's a book I have read multiple times. This one I did like. I started folding pages that had ties to Dracula by Bram Stoker, which I really like. I got up to chapter 26, page 211. However, I hit a point with this book where I was just finding it too slow, and I knew that I didn't want to DNF it completely and like unhaul it and never read it again. I knew it was just a mood thing and me not being ready to pick this one up. Part of me really wants to say I'm going to read this in October, because for some reason October for me is the time to read gothic classics, retellings of my favourite gothic classics. Like, that's what October is. However, I've already got quite a few reading plans in October. I've got a few books in mind already. Whether this one will also be on there, I have no idea, but definitely November at the very latest. Obviously, because it's the last month in the season, but yeah, I'm very intrigued by this one. I don't remember too many details of this, so I'm definitely going to reread these first 200 pages and then continue. But from what I do remember, we're following our main character who is brought up by her father on his own. She doesn't know too much about his past. He normally goes off on different trips abroad, out the country, and she gets left with a nanny. She then persuades him at some point to take her with him, and she starts learning these things about her father's past that make him very scared for her. And then something happens where she now has to investigate something. That's kind of where I got up to. But again, I don't remember fully. So what my plan is like I said, to reread these first bits, to annotate this book and just have a good old time with it. I'm not sure if I was underlining things or if I just folded pages. No, I just folded pages. I know I started this on a train journey and I can't remember if I actually had a pen with me or not. I really want to read this one. I think it's going to be fantastic and I just feel ready for it. Like, I've been thinking about it for a little while. It's been on my mind. I just feel like now is the time to get into this book. Speaking of now is the time to get into this book, I have Anne Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Yolo. Now, I'm pretty sure this has been on a TBR before, maybe in last year's seasonal TBR, or whether that was the Italian, I'm not sure. I have both. And I did yesterday, before filming this video, getting prepared to film this video and deciding what was going to be on this list, I did sit there and read the first paragraph of the Italian and this one, and in the end settled on this one. I do think the Italian is going to be a lot easier to read. I think it's a lot more lighter. It's a bit more of a romance with this monk trying to break up the couple. So I feel like it's going to be a little bit more funny, a little bit more light-hearted, with some darker moments in there. But this one just was darker, a little bit more dense straight from the start, and there was something about it that I was like, yes, this is the one I'm in the mood for. And I desperately want to read at least one Anne Radcliffe book this year. I don't know what it is, but I'm in the mood for it. And like I say, there's something about October that makes me go classics, so this is probably going to be read in October. I'm very intrigued by it. In this one, we are following an orphan, Emily, and she finds herself imprisoned with her evil guardian at Yodolfo. And in this book, it kind of breaks down her psyche and makes her question things, and there's a lot of sinister, dark things going on, and I'm so intrigued. This book has been mentioned in so many other books. Like, it's inspired so many things from other classic authors like Jane Austen with her Northanger Abbey, other books to more modern day books. Like, it's definitely a book I need to read. I think I'm going to really like it. Do I kind of regret not going for the Italian, because the Italian is a good 200 pages smaller? A little bit. Every time I think about it, I feel like this is the book I'm going to enjoy more. This is the one I want to tackle first, because it is that little bit more darker. I'm expecting that sense of dread and unease just to seep through the book when I'm reading it. So I don't know, I just got really high expectations for it. I feel ready to tackle it. Before, I wasn't ready to, but I'm really feeling classics. There's something about getting into colder months and shorter days that make me feel like classics are a good thing to read then. So I need to strike while the mood is hot and read this one while it lasts, because otherwise I'm never going to get around to it. What I really wanted to put on this TBR is a lot of rereads of like Dracula and Frankenstein, Picture of Dorian Gray, and because I love that. I love rereading those gothic classics at this time of year. However, I did that last year. I can't keep rereading all my favorites. I mean, I can do that 100%, but my classics TBR is huge and I really love reading gothic classics, so I need to find some new favorites. Okay, the rest of this TBR is more modern books. We have a book that I honestly don't know why I haven't picked up by now, and that is The Bleeding by Joanna Goster-Watson. This is a French book that has been translated by David Warriner. Very excited to read this. This is a murder mystery that spans 3 generations. So we have 1899. Lucienne's 2 young daughters are believed dead when her mansion burns to the ground, but she is certain that the girls are still alive and embarks on a secret journey to find them. We then have 1949, post-war Quebec. Teenager Lena's father has died in the French Resistance, and as she struggles to fit in at school, her mother introduces her to an elderly woman at the asylum where she worked. And then in 2002, we have a former school teacher is accused of brutally stabbing her husband, a famous university professor, to death. Detective Maxine Grant, who has recently lost her own husband and is parenting a teenager and a baby single-handedly, takes on the increasingly perplexing investigation, and I'm really intrigued to see how these 3 narratives are all going to come together. It sounds amazing. I have yet to find a French book that I haven't enjoyed. All the French translated books that I have read have ended up being fantastic reads. I have adored them. So I have really high hopes for this one. I have no reason not to have read this book. I got it last year when I was in Edinburgh. I think part of the reason is I never got round to reading it during the autumn time last year, and I do think this book is going to be really good to read during autumn. Like, there's just something about it that gives me those autumn vibes. Now, not every book will I do that with. Not every book do I feel the need to read in the particular season, but there are certain books that to me just scream a certain season, and I will wait a full year for the season to come back around to read it in, and I'm desperately hoping that doesn't happen again, because I know I'm not going to pick this up at any other time, because there's just something about it that makes me feel like autumn is when I need to read this one. Another book that, oh my god, I meant to read this ages ago when I first got it earlier this year, and that is Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. I got this one because of Gabby. Gabby was talking about it. Gabby loves it. It's a new favourite. It's definitely going to be in her top 10 of the year, she's been saying. I was intrigued. This one is based on the serial killer Ted Bundy. However, the serial killer never gets named, and instead we see it from the girl's perspective, and apparently it is fantastic. I've only heard good reviews from this book. I've heard it's really unsettling. I really want to read this one, and again, I think this sort of time is going to be perfect to read it. Am I a little bit apprehensive of reading this book when I live alone and reading this one of an evening time? Yes, especially because I have been creeping myself out with watching true crime documentaries of an evening time living on my own. Does it freak me out? Yes. Do I keep doing it anyway? Yes. So I feel like that has the potential to do the exact same thing for me, but again, I think reading this on those days where the days are getting shorter, it's getting colder outside, it's gonna be a good one to read for that. So this is just on here to remind myself I want to be reading this before the end of the year. The reason why I picked this one up was initially to read it like the next month. It just never happened, and since then I've kept forgetting about it when it comes to my TBR game. So yeah, I need to remember to actually make this fit a prompt for the TBR game, because I think it's going to be phenomenal. A book I know I'm going to be reading in October, because I have a whole reading vlog planned for it, is A Botanical Daughter by Noah Medlock. This is a Frankenstein inspired book, but make it botanical. So we have this gay couple in Victorian London, which is obviously not allowed because back then you could be imprisoned for being gay. But we have these 2 gentlemen, Simon and Gregor, who live in a botanical garden together, and they each focus on their respective science projects. One, Simon, is a taxidermist, and then Gregor is something to do with plants. And I believe Gregor finds this particular plant that is like, oh, this could reanimate things, and convinces Simon to reanimate a corpse or something. I'm not sure if he convinces Simon, whether he just does it or not. I've got no idea. I just know that a body gets reanimated with this plant, and I am intrigued. I think it's going to be a weird, creepy horror book with Frankenstein influence, and it's going to be great. And like I say, I do have a whole reading vlog planned for this book. Kind of wanted it on here just so I can feel good about the fact that I've at least got 2 books I'm definitely going to be reading, because the short story collection Tom and Chills is going to be read across the season, and this one I'm definitely going to be reading in October, and I feel like it's quite nice because at least that way I can go, okay, 2 are definitely getting read, that leaves me with 8 more to tackle, and that feels so much more doable to me. I'm probably just like tricking myself into that. Anyway, moving on, T. Kingfisher book, and I knew I wanted a T. Kingfisher book on this list because T. Kingfisher has become a auto-buy author for me, a staple author. It's someone that I know I can depend on to do a good book. It's not going to be a new favourite, but it's going to be a good time. They are so consistent, and I appreciate that so much because I think it's really hard to find an author with such a large volume of work as T. Kingfisher has and have every single book be a hit. And yet somehow T. Kingfisher has done that for me. So I had 2 physical books on my TBR that I could go with, and I decided to go with the one that's been on my TBR the longest, which is this one, the Twisted one. I recently read Hollow Places for a Discord book club pick, so if you ever want to take part in Discord, I'll have it linked below for you. We do monthly book clubs and stuff, and a lot of people were saying in there who had read Hollow Places and this one that they actually preferred this one, which I was really intrigued by. I had to get a copy shortly after. I don't know, I'm just intrigued. In this one we're following Mouse, who is going to be clearing out her grandmother's house, and is like, how bad can it be? Apparently really bad, and of course some creepy stuff's going to go down. I'm expecting humorous, creepy, horror stuff going on with a slightly older main character. And that's something actually I really appreciate with Teen Kingfisher, is our MCs generally tend to be slightly older, and as someone that's in my 30s, that feels really good. But yeah, I'm excited for this one. I have high hopes. I think it's going to be just a solid read, which again is always a good one to have in a TBR, is a book you know you're going to enjoy. And then the final book, I actually don't know what happened to past Kirsten, because clearly she couldn't count, because that was only book number 8 that I was then saying it was the last one of the TBR, which isn't true. And I actually don't even know what happened, because there was only 8 books on that list when I was filming the video. On my autumn TBR, like written version, I have 9, so I'm not sure what happened to the 10th book. It just kind of vanished. But even then, seeing as I didn't mention the 9th book in this original video, I've decided to swap it out. It was going to be a classic book that I was going to read for my October 24-hour readathon, the Relax and Readathon, which I'm still going to do, but I've decided to swap that one out for a cozy book, because thinking about this TBR more, editing it all just made me go, I don't really want to read loads of non-cozy books. As much as I am going to be reading the 3 new cozy releases a month, I kind of want one physical one off my TBR. So I've swapped out that one, which you don't even know what that was, but you'll know in the Relax and Readathon announcement. And instead I'm going to go with The Housekeepers by Alex Hay. This one is like a cozy crime heist story. We're following this party that's happening basically. So we've got this madam, she's throwing the party of the season, but she's also just laid off Mrs. King, her very loyal housekeeper. And now Mrs. King is like, okay, I'm gonna get my revenge. And they are going to plan the heist of the century with the other servants of this house. So it just sounds really fun, really entertaining, and I feel so much happier having at least one cozy book on here. Yes, I already have the Autumn Chills collection, which for me is cozy, I do think that, but I also just wanted one more cozy on here to break everything up. So we're gonna go with that. And then the 10th book that vanished, I've got no idea what I was planning to have for that 10th book. I just don't know. So I'm instead gonna go with a book that I know I definitely want to read very, very soon, and that is Nona the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. This is the 3rd book in the Locked Library series, a series that I have not stopped talking about since I read Gideon the Ninth, because I loved it so much. It is a very weird, complex sci-fi series. I loved it. I think it's fantastic. The first 2 books are so good. But last night I was reading a little short story that was within Harry the Ninth at the end. It was like an extra bonus story, and it made me realize that I actually need to make sure I read Nona ASAP, because it is complex enough that the details I'm starting to forget some of, and this is a very detail orientated series, so I need to make sure I'm remembering what's going on so I don't forget what's going on. Otherwise I'm going to be lost, because Tamsin does not hold your hand. They just kind of go for it and you've just got to go along for the ride. So yeah, I want to get this one read soon so I don't forget any more details of the first 2 books. But I love this series. It is so good. I've spoken about it so many times. I love it. But okay, with those 2 editions, we are now up to 10 books for this video. So now we can go back to the 10th and final book for this video. It's The Monster Barrow Cormorant by Seth Dickinson, and I'm very excited to get into this one. So I read The Traitor Barrow Cormorant earlier this year, and the plan was to finish out this trilogy this year. I really wanted to read it a lot quicker than what I have, because it's been a good few months since I read the first one. However, I hit a fantasy reading slump and it hit me hard. There's a lot of fantasy series that I should be continuing on with, but I've decided to give myself slack, just continue on with one in autumn, have that be the focus, and I've decided to go with this one because I know I'm going to like this one. It is a darker political fantasy and I love it so much for what it's doing. So this book is about what it is to be colonized. It's got this big regime called the Masquerade, and they are slowly taking over the world. Barrow sees them come to her home and the slow takeover that they did, and they did it so slowly. At first it was, oh, we're just selling some things, you know, we're just going to be merchants, we're just selling a few things, but we're only going to give you change in our currency so that the next time we come to market you can only really trade with us because you've only got our currency. So we're just going to slowly change your currency to suit our needs. And then they establish a school and they start teaching the children how their way of life, well, it's really wrong. Like, don't you understand? You should only have one mother and one father. anything else, well, that's unclean practice. You can't do that. And coming from a home where Burrow has 2 fathers and a mother, and a community where children are looked after communally, she knows what they're doing is wrong. She is incredibly smart, and she knows that what they're doing is so wrong and yet so effective that is tearing her homeland apart. And so Barrow vows that she is going to take them down from the inside. And so she makes herself become needed within the Masquerade government. She makes it so that they cannot do without her, that her particular skill set is so needed that they trust her implicitly. And the things that she does in that first book to gain that trust is awful, just to prove to them, well, I'm one of you. I'm 100% one of you. Of course I believe in everything you're doing, but she's only doing it so that she can then save her homeland. And she has to weigh up, do I wreck another nation to save my homeland? Is it worth it? Is the end worth the means? Because at the end of the day, once I take down this government, once I take down this enterprise, everyone is free. And if that means that some several thousand people get caught in the middle, so be it. As she is ruthless, absolutely ruthless, and it is fantastic. But it is more of a political fantasy. There's not so much about magic and stuff. There's a lot of talk about eugenics, things like that. It is brutal and brilliant. So I really want to continue, and I knew that if I was to read this while I was in the midst of my fantasy reading slump, that it would put a dampener on how much I enjoyed this book, and I didn't want to do that because I think this is fantastic. It is an older series. I think it's about 20 years. I want to say 20 years, but maybe not quite as old as that. Doesn't have it in here, but it is an older series. I just think it's so well done. It is so good. It's so complex. Not enough people talk about it, and if you like The Will of the Many, then I'm sorry, but you need to read this book, like this series, because it does it so much better. The same thing that everyone was like, oh my god, this is amazing, this is what The Will of the Many is doing. This series, as much as the first book, the Traitor Borrow Cormorant book, doesn't go in depth into the school part, which is kind of what I was hoping The Will of the Many give me. The same vibes as the Traitor Borrow Cormorant, but make it more to do with the school and kind of like a slower look into things. It doesn't, because that character is a wet blanket compared to Borrow Cormorant. I love this series so much. So I definitely want to be reading that one, and honestly I would love to finish out this series by the end of the year, but we'll see how the mood takes me, because I'm not going to force myself through the series if I'm not feeling it. I'm being very careful with how much fantasy I read because of the fact I hit that fantasy slump. Cozy fantasy is a different story. These sort of fantasy books I'm taking my time with. But yeah, those are the 10 physical TBR books I want to be reading during autumn. I'm very excited for them. As I said, this will be mixed in with new cozy releases, but as I don't own them yet, I decided not to include them on this TBR. Please let me know what you're going to be reading during the autumn season. If you would read any of these, if you're interested in any of these, let me know in the comments below. And thank you so much for watching. Like, genuinely, I know I say it all the time, but I really do love it. I love the community that we're creating on here. I love being able to interact with you all in the comments. It is amazing. So if you made it this far or you just don't know what to comment, then feel free to leave me like an autumn emoji, whether that's a leaf or a pumpkin or whatever screams autumn or fall to you. Leave that in the comments below, and yeah, I'm gonna go. So thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it that thumbs up, subscribe and comment. Those 3 things really help this channel out. My social media links, anyone I've mentioned, will be linked below for you, and I will of course catch you in the very next video.